I think the simplest explanation of innovation in terms of how I think about it is change for good. It's doing something new that creates new value for a user or a citizen. I think there are some interesting ideas around what innovation is, that some of which are useful and some of which are not. I think the idea that innovation is simply the idea of coming up with a new way of doing things, or coming up with an idea or an invention, is probably the most misconstrued notion in the innovation literature. There's a traditional assumption that innovation's about we come up with a great invention in a university, and then it's about how we commercialise it and how we get people to buy it. That accounts for a very small proportion, about 4% of how businesses actually innovate. I think that there's an interesting notion, Robert Atkinson uses the idea of innovation as the creative part of creative destruction in an economy. The new things that will be created of value that might replace the old. So innovation for me is fundamentally about that simple idea of change for good, doing things in a better way that creates value as judged by someone else, not by yourself. So innovation is now responsible for around 2/3 of the economic growth of developed economies. So just on pure numbers, it's the biggest driver of economic development going forward. This will be increasingly so as we move forward, and the role of knowledge in economic activity increases. The role of the ability of different players in a system to combine their capabilities in new ways to do things of higher value will become more important as our economy becomes more complex. So one of the corollaries of an economy with increasing specialisation is that you get many people doing many more expert things in specialised niches. So the ability to combine some of those different niches and combine those capabilities is at a premium, and that's what drives a lot of innovation today, not just in organisations, but across groups of firms, in clusters and across networks. I think you need a couple of things. I think you need to recognise that a lot of the elements of innovation that a particular region or state or city is driving will be in very niche spaces. They'll develop niche capabilities that they become a global leader in. However, the framework for innovation needs to start with the questions rather than the answers. It has to start with the propositions about what we realistically believe we can be very good at, that provides a basis for other players to come in behind and develop an innovation capability around. I think there's a sort of direct question around the economy is a complex system. It just happens to be that so too is our education system, our health system, our systems of urban development, sustainability and the like. So many of the attributes that you need to innovate in an economy are the same attributes that you need to innovate in a social system or an environmental system. At the same time, it's fundamental to recognise that innovation in economic development comes from industry. If you go back to that definition of innovation being the point at which you create value by doing something new for a customer, innovation in industry, by definition, that doesn't happen from government. It's businesses that innovate in the economic sense. But equally, a society that has an innovative economy is a society that is open-minded, that tolerates new ways of doing things and embraces new ways of doing things. And they're precisely the traits that make an economy an attractive place, a location, an attractive place to live. And also the same traits that you're going to need if you're going to innovate within social service systems or environmental systems or cities and the like. I mean, if you think of sort of a virtuous circle whereby you create a good society and a strong economy, which are the very things that they're the attributes that attract talented people from around the world, that make people want to stay there or move there and live there. So you create a situation where you become known as innovative, but you value innovation both for its economic impact and its impact on quality of life. And that becomes self-reinforcing in your ability to attract the new problem-solving and idea-generating class that are driving a lot of that knowledge-based innovation, the practical problem-solving in businesses. Yep. So, I mean, those social elements are themselves quite directly around a third of our economy. And there is an equivalent debate that needs to take place about how do we do new things and do them in new ways in our education systems and our health systems and so on. One of the key characteristics of those systems is that the outcomes you want to achieve for society are fundamentally dependent on not just the rules of the game that government sets, but equally the take-up and the mindset and the buy-in of new ways of doing things by teachers and principals, by engaging students in their own learning, or by doctors within the systems, and the role of hospitals in organising systems, the role of patients in self-management of health conditions. So the big sort of conceptual breakthrough that is needed in innovation as an economic system is one that in many senses is actually far more intuitive in those social systems, in that government can't do it alone anymore, but you absolutely have to have government in there at the table if innovation is going to really occur. I think that there are sort of components of a system and capabilities that you need to have in a system, but probably the biggest point in that space is that you need to start not from what are the components we need to have, but start from what's the problem that has to be solved, and start with less of an intellectual exercise than a very practical exercise about what is the real world problem that we need to solve right now, which will tease out in a conversation the types of capabilities that might be needed, not just to provide a solution to a firm, but a solution for an industry, or that might lead to the development of an industry, or the development of a systemic response to an education problem, or a health problem, or an environmental problem. It has to start with that conversation around that gets you to a shared understanding of the nature of the problem, before you get to the many different activities that you might be able to do to work towards solutions to that problem. I mean, it has to start with a set of stakeholders that are proximate enough to the problem to understand the problem and to be able to get to a sense of shared understanding. So to just open it up is going too large. You've got to kind of open it up in a way that you're building a layer of shared understanding as you open up those conversations. So it needs to start in a particular industry context with the industry players, and then needs to pull in the researchers and the governments and so on. But it needs to kind of start and do it incrementally as opposed to just one big conversation. I think you've got an interesting situation in defence, largely because defence is not a globally competitive industry in the sense that the Australian government's going to outsource to the best in the world. So you have the opportunity in South Australia to become the best in Australia and capture a large part of that internal market. That also, the defence industry, one of its characteristics is very advanced technologies that have high spillovers into other parts of the economy, particularly in the manufacturing economy. So I think in that advanced manufacturing into engineering design space, the software around systems that are needed in defence are obvious examples. I think that South Australia also has an unrecognised specialisation in medical research. And it lines up with a number of things. You've got an ageing population, you've got a bureaucracy of a size that should be agile enough to do things with other sectors in a way that maybe the bigger states can't. And you've got an emerging model in health innovation whereby that integration of medical research and clinical practice is producing better outcomes than the traditional model of the researchers over here, the clinicians over here. So I think there's an interesting model that you might be able to develop out of South Australia that other states can't, that might just be, might just set you up as a leader in that health innovation space. I think that one of the really important points that is a challenge for all Australian jurisdictions, because there's a bit of a clash with the predominant national culture, is the statement that you're going to be innovative and the perception that you're innovative. So Australia is not perceived as an innovative country. That doesn't change if you are to do nothing but to respond to what people say you should do. Because people, when you ask people what to do, one of the things that doesn't come back is become more innovative. So it's going to take leadership and leadership from the front to make an assertion and a bold statement that we want to be an innovative culture, we want to be a creative culture, we want to translate what is a uniquely Australian model of innovation around tinkering and practical problem solving into being the best innovators in the world. That happens to be the model of innovation that's going to succeed in the century ahead, is that practical problem solving, real world problems. We don't have in Australia the same tradition to such a large extent as other countries do, of that idea that it's the experts that drive solutions, or it's the universities that will drive all of our innovation. So we should get rid of the notion before it becomes embedded. I think it's already too far embedded in policymaker thinking and the thinking of the scientific community, and it just doesn't line up anymore with the evidence of how businesses actually innovate, where it's only 4% of that that's directly related to their relationship with a university or a higher education institution. So grab that space that is about the practical real world problem solving and the practical question of how do we do that. Yeah, I think it actually has to start with the framing statement, and that's never enough by itself. But one of the challenges there is to make the statement that's not a statement of we are going to be the best at, have the best health system in the world and the best education system. It's a statement that we really value innovation in health and better outcomes in health. We really value better outcomes in education. We really value better outcomes in the environment, and use the framing as a de-risking strategy by making it clear that what you're stating is a value-based objective, not a solution that you believe you've got in hand. And then you can open up a conversation around that question. So the key to the leadership in that space is to ask the right question and make the bold statement about the issues that people value the most in a state or in a country. But then equally recognise that government can't do it alone, and the solutions you develop are going to be much more effective if they're developed in partnership with the players that you're actually asking to implement them or be involved in solutions. It certainly is. I mean, one of the great limitations, I think, of how we conduct ourselves in the public service, and it's a fierce independence tradition in the public service, and it's entirely understandable. But public servants talk a particular language that the community doesn't understand. Politicians, interestingly, are much closer to that community language than public servants are, because they have to explain themselves to their constituents every day of the week. I think there is a need for a real bridge in the communication between the politics and the public service, so that, and with both of them in mind, to just recognise that at the end of the day you're speaking to players that are businesses or communities or citizens. So speak in a language that they're going to understand. So South Australia suffers a lot from its geography. It's a long way away from not just the immediate markets of Sydney and Melbourne and the other cities in Australia, but also global markets. I think there is a really great opportunity for South Australia to grab the open innovation space, to recognise that and to kind of boldly say that, whether it's in health innovation or education innovation or sustainability innovation, whatever it might be, or the economy, to boldly say we want to open our problems up or our challenges up to the world, and whoever is out there with a solution, come and help us. And throw that open as a, what are the policy solutions? Sure. And look around and just observe what others are doing. Equally, what are the technological solutions? Throw that open. What are the social marketing and behavioural change solutions? What are the institutional solutions? One of the really interesting things in South Australia is you're not a massive bureaucracy. So you're not a massive bureaucracy. On the one hand, it means you don't have massive internal capabilities. Equally, you're not bound by massive internal bureaucracy. So throw it open. Throw the innovation question open as a question for South Australia, not a question for the South Australian bureaucracy. I think messaging does matter in this space, but I think it's sort of messaging only matters to a certain degree. And the leadership statement and even the strategy and the changes in the rules of the game and changes in policy only get you so far. What you need to get to is sort of move from a shared understanding to a shared commitment to action in many different ways, so that you get towards a mindset that is much more open-minded, about potential solutions to problems, and explicitly so. That culturally, people come on board with the idea that we're going to have to find new ways if we're going to sustain South Australian industry and South Australian jobs and create a better society and make our society a better place to live. So there are a couple of things that I think you've got to challenge people on, but equally I think South Australians, like other Australians, are absolutely up for that challenge, and that for too long governments have sort of sat there and said, oh, it's a bit of a shame that we've got this issue of rising expectations of citizens, without going back to them and saying, well, actually, here's a set of reasonable expectations you have of us, and here's a set of reasonable expectations that we have of you. And if we're going to actually become a more innovative, a stronger economy, a better environment, deliver better services, then we can only do that if you're going to play your part. Become an active partner in what we're trying to build in the state, as opposed to leaving it as a job for government alone. So that you're taking a shared vision, you're taking a government vision and making it a shared vision. And it give the community the space to define aspects of that vision themselves as well. So make it a sort of a shared value statement, if you like, that they feel ownership of and also some responsibility to act towards.